Hello.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Good, good. How are you, Abdul?
I'm good.
We have a new lineup today. So it's completely different from the previous weeks. I think for some time actually, we had Dwayne helping me with this. So I thought, let's get some other people on here and get some to build some other stuff. So yeah, so today we're doing something else. We're doing something different. Igor, do you want to tell us what we're doing today?
Yeah, so today we'll be discussing like the Android application that we have built to create a chat application. So we'll take a look at closer into details, like see what kind of feature the app have, and like go into implementation to see how we can use Vonage SDK and our custom server app to build that.
Sounds good. Yeah, so last week we kind of finished the entire backend, the companion app. So we have an API now that provides all that data that is used by the client. And the reason for that is because we have some security in there, we have some authorization via GWTs, and also there are a couple of ways to do things that are not necessarily available in the SDK. So specifically creating a new conversation. In the context of what we need. So you can use the client SDK to kind of do other things, but we wanted to do it a specific way and add members to it and so on. So that's what we did. Okay. So Abdul is here to kind of cheer us and help us a bit. Actually, let's do some introductions because you haven't been here for a couple of months now. So Igor, do you want to tell people what sort of things you're doing?
Yeah, so I work at Vonage as Android developer advocate. So we basically deal with product, to make sure that the developers that are using our tool have a tool that is high quality and that is easy to use. We are the persons to get the feedback from you, like to where we can improve, and also work on products ourselves. Like so, we built a lot of things around like samples, documentation, everything to make your life as a developer, our user developer easier.
Yeah, and you do that across both kind of what was called the old Nexmo.
We have
as
like
well as the video, right?
exactly, because we had this Nexmo SDK and OpenTalk, and now we kind of merging them. At least like we should merge them into big Vonage SDK. So we're doing this on both fronts for now.
Yeah. Dwayne is in the shadows. Hey, Dwayne. I hope you're well. I hope you not miss me too much on a Monday morning. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think we're trying to get away from the Nexmo and kind of open talk naming stuff. I think your microphone is hissing a bit, Igor. I think your fans are probably spinning. Did you start Android Studio by any chance?
No, it's not.
That
feeling that it's all about the second screen external graphic card. Let me figure this out. You know how those laptops are, right?
Oh no, it was Abdul actually. I've just muted it. I think it's Abdul.
Because mine is also loud. Like this is the laptop, like it. But let's hope it will be fine.
Yeah, I'll mute Abdul for now. Just I think you open Xcode, so I can make the joke on the other side as well. Right?
Yeah, actually, I was installing Xcode like some time ago, and it was a very, very long process.
Yeah, it's actually so much better. It's so much. Abdul, welcome back. On the new Macs, it's actually a way faster process, and it compiles way faster.
I imagine they have dedicated chip to install Xcode.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
No, but guys, aren't you like never wonder? You download this SDK, I don't know, 500 megs or 1 gig or whatever, and it like installs for 5 minutes or 10. Like I really wonder what's happening.
It installs all the libraries that it needs. It's basically what you're doing with Gradle after you open your project.
I get the idea, but like when I extract the file, like how it doesn't matter how heavily it was compressed, like it's still faster. So like there must be going a lot of stuff.
I think it also installs a lot of documentation, installs lots of files. It's probably the sheer size of the amount of files that you have.
Okay, so we need faster drives.
Hey, welcome to the show. Yeah, you can have faster drives, but I think what they did with M1 is actually they put everything in the same chip, so you don't have the backbone where you have a transfer. It's a bit like in most of the cases, it's the electronic signals traveling inside the computer that slow things down to some degree, and the RAM and everything. And having everything in just one single chip, I think makes things way faster. And I think it's just the way things are going to go in the future. At the expense of repairability and being able to upgrade stuff, and everything is soldered on the same chip. But well, it's a way of saying soldered. It's not really soldered. It's actually made.
Yeah. I'm waiting for new Mac Pros, like the bigger one, with I don't know how many cores.
Yeah. It's. I think they're gonna announce something. I think I saw something.
23rd or something of March, I think.
No, it's not gonna happen because it's tomorrow, 23rd. So they didn't. They need a week to announce it. But yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Michael is showing his face and true colors. Funny enough, actually, both of them had their one-to-ones today already. So yeah, cool.
It was one-to-one online.
One-to-one online. Yeah, we can do it here. Why not? Cool. That sounds good. Okay, so shall we get started? Let's. Actually, Abdul, you need to introduce yourself as well. Sorry, I completely forgot.
Hi, yeah. Well, I usually let Igor go first, so I can just say I do everything Igor does, but for iOS.
Okay. Next time I'm doing this trick.
You need to answer with a grep expression that we put under the or something.
Yeah.
But this is like the second time you do this.
Yeah. Michael likes that as well. Well, it's it's very true. I think thinking of it, I don't think there's much difference between what you two are doing, apart from the platform, obviously. But yeah, you both have two languages to support, one old and one new.
Exactly.
You both have APIs that update every year, and you need to keep on top of them.
We both have phones at home.
Yeah.
Screening fans in our laptops.
Yeah, and kind of. I'm guessing you both had the lower heating bills this winter because of Xcode and Android Studio, right? So you should try open both at the same time and see how it is. But yeah,
it's not like Android Studio itself, but usually when you run the emulator, it's like an Android emulator is basically a virtual machine. So like it needs a lot of CPU and things just goes hot. That's why I never use it. I use like external phone. It saves resources.
I think Michael has some words for you because apparently both use old Windows phones. So
I have a lot of phones, those two and like another one, just like collection of phones.
Yeah, Michael noted that he didn't show you what operating system he has on those phones. He just showed you the phones, not the fact that they're on Windows.
We should support that.
Windows is a feature. Cool. Okay. Are you ready to? Shall I share your screen, Igor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
Let's do it.
Let's go for it.
Okay. So let's briefly chat about the application and some features. Like this will be like high level diagram of the app. So we will have this mobile app. Of course, this one is Android one. That uses Vonage Client SDK, which is basically library dependency within the project. So this is one way of the communications with Vonage servers. Another one is like custom built API we created last week. So this is basically, let me turn on the drawing. Oh yeah, so this basically is our backend that was created last week that this mobile app will connect to. So this exposes like multiple endpoints. We'll go into details soon, but basically it allows us to create users, sign up, log in those users, create conversations, get list of conversations, and this is it. So then this our backend application communicates with our Vonage. a second, with our Vonage servers that are somewhere here. So we do it through the Vonage conversation API. Directly communicate directly to those servers. Like alternative would be to use Vonage server SDK. That sometimes help, but for this project we haven't used it. So this is like very high level view of the application. Basically, Android app. Okay. Sorry, my screen drawing tool just broke. So basically, Android application is chatting to our backend. Our backend is chatting to Vonage APIs and back, of course, like that. And on top of that, our application can sometimes chat to this Vonage servers directly. We'll show this in a minute. So let's quickly run the app to show the UI and show how this works. So for this, we need an Android Studio. Okay.
While you're doing that, I've just put the Unidonk on the screen because this project is we call it the Unidonk. It's so this is part of a bigger project to do what we call the checkbox driven development, right? Otherwise, we call it the Unidonk. So hence the and shout out to Michael for creating that for us.
Okay, so we have the application, and we can log in using existing users or sign up the new one. So let's say we call it Igor 2. Then the name will be the same, and the password will be secret password. We can sign up. So after signing up, the app downloads the list of the conversation for the given user, or like conversations that the user is part of. For now, we don't have any, so we can create new conversations with some users that already exist. So it's like pre-filled test users. So let's create one with Abdu and Paul too. And by doing so, we will be moved into the conversation. We can send the message to other users. This message appears here. Going back to
this loaded somewhere so I can send a message back, but yeah, we'll do that towards the end. I'll have it ready for the end. So
okay, have it ready. Yeah. So now this conversation has appeared on our list, and we can of course go into details and chat again. So this is quite simple app, like with few screens, but a lot of interesting things is happening under the hood, because you need to remember that when building those apps, we need to take into consideration certain features or requirements that comes from Vonage Client SDK, some related to network communication, like let's say authentication for resources, and some that are related to Android platform, like Android life cycles or different things that may happen during our application being working, like our application being moved to the background. So I think we should go into code to see what's going on under the hood. So we will basically go screen by screen and discuss what we are doing here. So this application is utilizing Android navigation component, which is this micro navigation component by Google as a part of the Jetpack libraries. So when we make it bigger, you will see that we will have we'll have 4 screens, right? So from first screen is login screen. This is the screen. You have this icon of home, which is the screen that is run when we start the application. Then from this screen, we can either log in, put our credentials, and go to our conversation list that we've seen, or we can go to the sign up screen, where we can sign up, and then we'll move to the same conversation list screen. Then from this list, either from the screen, either by clicking on the conversation or creating new one, we'll be moved to conversation detail, where we can actually chat with our users. So going screen by screen, I'm not sure how much code I will actually see. Okay, so the login fragment is first. So interesting part about this app is that every screen is represented by multiple classes. So typically those are two classes. One is the fragment class, where basically fragments are used to display items like on UI related elements. And the other one is Android View model, which is another class from Jetpack Components that is kind of controller that sits behind the screen that survives device rotation when screen is destroyed and things like that. And of course, with View model, we would use typically live data for Android to send this data from View model to our fragment. So one more thing before we go into details of this screen, we have this main activity that is like main entry point for our whole application. So here we basically will initialize our Nexmo client. We're still renaming those things, so at some point this will be Vonage client. And we'll initialize like custom class that is called Navigation Manager, which allows us to navigate a little bit easier. I will get back into details in a moment. And this activity has a very simple layout that basically contains one view, which is navhost fragment. This is special view delivered from navigation component. So this is like host or container for all the views that we will be changing. So all those 4 views that we've seen: login, sign up, conversation list, and conversation details will be kind of changed by Android within this single container when we navigate to different destinations. So the first view is login view, which consists of login fragment and view model. So here inside this login fragment, we will basically initialize everything on view created method as usual for Android fragments. So we do few things here. So first of all, we need to have bindings for our view. So previously we used this Android find view by ID to get reference to the view that is defined in layout for this class. So for this is like login fragment. So we have different views that we defined here. So we have like this, make it bigger. So we have fields to enter username, password, buttons to login and sign up, and this is all defined in XML where we represent Android views. But for a class, for a fragment, we need to get reference. So initially, like a few years ago, we were using find view by ID, which we can still use now, but the binding is safer. Then we used Kotlin Android extensions to solve the same problem, or there was like butter knife library for Java where we annotate stuff and we could access those instances in code. But newest and coolest approach from Google is to use binding, where we do it in a little bit safer way than previous Kotlin Android extensions.
So binding is like a reference to itself, right? Like this in JavaScript sort of thing.
Could you repeat that?
Binding is a bit like a reference to itself, right? It's kind of with all the objects mapped inside, all the different interface elements.
Yeah, exactly. So binding is basically custom fragment by login. So we have the name of the view, login fragment, or actually in the name of the layout, because we name layouts fragment login versus classes we name login fragments. It's like one of these interesting things on Android. So yeah. This is class that is fully generated from this view. Sorry, I cannot show you the source of the class because it moves me to the layout, like ID kind of simplification. But this class exists. We can actually try to open it. Maybe it will work like that. No, it will not. We could open it and find it somewhere. But basically, this class only contains fields that reference those items in a view.
Right. And is that generated automatically by the system?
Yes. So this is generated. So when we go to build Gradle for our app module, we will have the setting to enable view bindings.
Interesting.
And by enabling this, I imagine some kind of Gradle plugin is enabled under the hood, and for every layout file that we create in our layouts for the folder, we will have class generated class with bindings.
Right.
And now we could use this. This is custom.
It's a bit how core data works behind the scenes, Abdul, isn't it? On iOS, so it gets generated some of this intermediate classes. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's quite similar. Like it just took Android a little bit longer.
But you still need to include that binding stuff in there, right? It doesn't do it automatically for you.
Yeah, so we still need to include that, and this actually is a custom delegate of mine, which makes this a little bit simpler.
Okay.
With some code under the hood that connects to Android lifecycle. These things probably Google will release their own at some point, but this allows us to make it one-liner. And the way delegates work, this is Kotlin construct. So the way delegates work, like first time when I'm accessing this instance here, Kotlin will kind of initialize this object using this this delegate.
So it's lazy loading that.
Yeah, it's kind of lazy loading. The reason for that is we cannot access certain items until fragment is created. So when you would try to initialize this without the delegate, you will have an exception because the fragment, the view is not in a state where you can actually access those items yet.
This is very similar how it works in iOS as well. Before you get to instantiate the view, and all the IB outlets and all the stuff kind of null, and if you access them, you'll crash. Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to that.
Yeah, exactly. So Kotlin allows us to do it like as a one-liner, and we would have access to those items, right? So for login we basically need to add sign-up buttons. We can add simple click listeners. Another delegate that we are using here is delegate for a view model, which basically gives us instance for a view model for this particular view. But this does a little bit more under the hood. So if you let's say if you're navigating, on your stack, so you go from, let's say, let me visualize this. So navigation design. It's hard to do it on the small screen, so you need to forgive me. Yeah. So for example, this view binding delegate. Sort of view model delegate is a little bit different because when we navigate, let's say, from login to conversation fragment, it will create us a new instance of the view model. But if you, for example, go from here to details and then go back, then the same instance would be reused. However, if we go back again to the login fragment, then this instance of the view model will be destroyed. So when we navigate kind of again here, we would enter kind of this empty new screen navigation state. So if Android decides like when to give you which view model based on where you are in this navigation graph. Okay, so let's go back to our login fragment. So what else do we have here? So we have also the observer where we use the live data stream from a view model that will basically publish some kinds of data into our view. The reason why we cannot simply call here like view model get me data is that their Android lifecycle is quite complicated, and like if you, let's say, receive the data within wrong application state, then your application may crash. So if you would want to like receive here like synchronous data, then probably would be fine. Also, it's not may not be recommended. However, if you would want to like load data from network, there is a chance that this data will arrive in the wrong view state. So imagine you start network requests, and then you leave this screen and go to the other one, and this screen is then in a kind of paused or destroyed state, and then this data goes back, and then your app will crash. So that's why we use this live data, which is basically data stream, which gives us guarantee that the data that will arrive to the screen will only arrive if the screen is in proper state. Does it make sense? Okay, so it does. So then,
I think it does. It's quite different from iOS, because in iOS you don't have this jumping between different screens. So it's not entirely kind of random. So in Android you can jump by design between any two screens at any time. Well, in iOS you can't really do that. You have to have a certain chain, and with that, actually, it's easier to send data across between screens.
Yeah, so for Android, I think when they designed the system, they designed it from like, this is our application and this is the way it interacts with the system. But no one really looked at this point, how this will like impact development of the application or architecture of the application. And the result is that there are some problems in Android that are there forever. Google or different libraries are trying to give nicer or easier ways to deal with those issues. But at the end, the system is there under the hood. So there's limited amount of things that you can really do.
Yeah. I think it feels Android app. It feels more like a collection of different screens that have some connection between them. But you can kind of pick and mix whatever you like. Mainly because you have that back button that literally when you go back, you don't go back in the context of the same app. You just go back in the context of operating system. So you can back can mean jump to a different app. Which is not possible in iOS.
So for Android, the approach with NavGraph is exactly what you're saying. So if you would be on the first screen, login and press back, then you would close the app or go back. Because also in Android, you need to remember that, imagine that you are within the calendar app. You can click join the meeting and open the screen of, let's say, our Vonage messaging application and just start video call. So then kind of going back makes sense, because you go back to the calendar where you started before.
Yes and no. I think I like the one in iOS a bit better because you're running the meeting in the context of the app. So back means back inside the app rather than back as in whatever you're doing. So you can do the same thing in iOS. You can jump to any arbitrary screen, providing that you know how it instantiated and you provide the data. But you don't have a back to jump outside it. The way to jump outside it is you need to use the app switcher and just go to the other app, whatever you call it from.
Okay, I got the idea. Yeah, I think it's just different approach. Interesting. I think as an idea, like this sounds cool in my head, but like when I'm implementing this, I'm thinking, oh no, there is another edge case where your app is open somewhere in the middle by the third app, and some data is coming from, like, let's say, those links where you could click on the website, right, and open your app in some way. So,
but you should design your app like that, because iOS works in the same way. You would expect to jump to any screen in iOS using exactly that methodology.
Yeah. So for Android, it's similar but different. Yeah. I don't have that much experience with iOS, to be honest, but I did my first app, so what's the plus?
Check for text.
Exactly. Text. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Sounds good.
So going back to our login screen, so we have this login, sign up button basically navigates us. We're going to view model soon. Login button does a little bit of validation. We are checking if name and password fields are not empty. If they are, we just return, and if not, we basically call the login on the view model, which manages this view. If not, we may display some kind of errors and tell the user that something is empty. So the view model is let's go to the view model. So view model for this particular view does something. So for this, we will have some network requests. So we need the repository. This one uses static reference because our singleton is our repository is a singleton. But ideally, we should inject this into view model if you want to make it clear and testable. And the same is with navigation manager. It's custom class that is singleton. Ideally, it should be injected just for testing, making testing easier. And we have our live data, which of course have different constraints. So the idea with live data is that we have mutable live data, where we can actually post things, and just live data where we can only read things. So ideally, you want to have mutable live data within the view model, so we can post things, but you want to expose just live data, so the fragment, the UI, cannot modify it by accident. So that's why we need kind of two variables. One would store the mutable version where we can post to from view model, and another one would store public version that is just live data where client can just observe the stream without a way to modify it by accident. So when we start our view model, we have those two methods, right? The navigate to sign up, which basically just creates some navigation directions object, generated by Android library, and a way to navigate to the destination, and the login that does a little bit more. So our login will communicate with the network. This uses, we need to launch it within view model scope, because this actually utilizes Kotlin coroutines. So this whole call within this block is happening asynchronously.
What's an Android coroutine?
So it's Kotlin coroutine. So a coroutine is a way to make a synchronous request in kind of synchronous way. So when you look at this code, right, even if this happens asynchronously, I could put a breakpoint here and just debug line by line. So I don't have to do like, let's say, make network request and register callback, and when I will get the result, I will trigger the callback. But the Kotlin will kind of call this to suspend the code here, and wait until the data is returned, and then we'll continue with the execution of rest of the code.
So is that like a thread?
Yeah, so coroutines has like own scopes, kind of like a thread, but much more efficient. And coroutine kind of have own scope of dispatchers where they basically distribute those jobs across them. Yeah, but it's basically like a nicer way of dealing with background thread than using callbacks.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's quite similar to the async await sort of way of doing things, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think
it's closer to GCD actually, Ground Central Dispatch in iOS. You have the same sort of thing where you can start kind of thread, and you can synchronize threads, and you can have semaphores and all the other stuff.
But yeah, I think it's all happening on Swift Evolution currently. They've got all these different pictures up. But I think we're getting a similar thing in Swift soon. So in Swift, you would just call just await a result, and you'll call the function, and that will happen asynchronously.
Isn't that in the context of a single thread? So you kind of. So I think the way it works is you have a way to sync, and that creates its own thing, and then comes back, right? But I think what's happening here, you create a separate thing entirely, and then just fit it back when you get the data.
So it's kind of under the hood. The Kotlin coroutine is kind of like reusing threads and like do it in some efficient way. But the advantage of like doing this like view model scope that you can see now is that basically it's connected to the UI. So if user, let's say, navigates out of the view, this scope will be considered kind of invalid. So it will close all the requests and everything that is here. So this is like a nice way to deal and manage resources in more efficient way, and don't worry about some requests, that can come later, and use some work in background and do some job in background.
So what did we use in the Android world before this was made available?
We used like 3 or 4 different things. So at the beginning we had some just async task class with 3 callbacks. Then Android get crazy with RxJava, which basically solved nicely the problem of multi-threading on Android, but gave us those streams that can process millions of records on database, and we just use them to get network requests and get data back. So like this shotgun to kill a fly. Then the Kotlin coroutines kind of came, and they gave us, I would say, a really nice way to deal with this problem. And for now, I think this is the best approach. Like you can still use RxJava, but it brings a lot of complexity on its own. So
yeah, because it's quite a nice way, especially if you get the cancellation for free and you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you create dependencies between coroutines?
So the dependencies are kind of defined by those scopes. So because the way to run coroutine is to, when you go to here to the body of the coroutine, so you see this is the suspended function. So you can only run suspended function within the suspended function. So this kind of creates this tree of dependencies, because this is kind of like first level of suspended function, and every function within that, like lower, need to be suspended as well. So this will create this tree and those kind of dependencies where by cancelling top function, the child nodes will be also cancelled.
Right, okay.
Unless you have different dependencies in mind.
No, I mean, I meant if for example, you have two different operations, like if you have that launch, for example, and you want to do one after the other, like when one is finishing, start the other, or if one is failing, cancel the other.
So if you want to just finishing one, you could just copy this here. It would like hold the code until this is finished and then run this one.
I see.
But you have different operators where you can like kind of, because this, I think this returns something.
Yeah, that's what I had in mind. So
Yeah,
assign something.
returns the job. Yeah. So you could have two jobs and kind of run them, as you said, like in parallel, and do something when both are finished, or do something when one failed. Yes. So this is.
Yeah, I think it's kind of more applicable when you have lots of data, like if you're trying to get 100 images and change something about them. If one of them fails to download, you want to cancel the subsequent job to modify that image because it failed, right? So, yeah, interesting. That's the syntax actually looks really, really simple to use.
I think the Kotlin coroutines are really like one of the coolest things in Kotlin, and they really like help with like simple tasks, like you just want to make network requests, right? You don't want to think about callbacks, because with one request this is easy, right? But if you would have like, I don't know, 3 requests one after another, or some requests that depends on each other, then this callback code becomes complicated really quickly.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have the result. And like basically, to keep things simple, we will check whatever the result like is of type where we have some data, which is a success here, or is it an error, and based on that we'll make a decision. Like this can be done in a little bit nicer way, but this is just a simple approach, so we don't want to complicate things too much. So so in this case, when each time when we get the response, notice also here that the response is on green. This basically means that we used something that's called smart casting in Kotlin. So when I check the type of the object result in this case, Kotlin knows that the type of this object is already of login view model. So I don't have to like do type checking and then casting again. Like Kotlin already knows that this check was successful and the object has certain type. So I can access all the properties of this type. So what we're doing here is basically creating new navigation directions, and we will pass a few things. So this is the shortcut that we are using, because for the API backend we built gives us a little bit more data when we log in the user, when we sign up. So we have already list of all the conversations that may exist, or all the users in the system, and the token to communicate with the API. So for example, conversations, we can use preloaded one when we go to conversation list screen, instead of going to the screen and downloading them there. And then we navigate to conversation list screen, or in case of error, we'll just post the value to the UI using live data and display it.
Nice. So I'm guessing the sign up works in a very similar way, just send different data, because you get the same data in sign up as well, right?
Yes, exactly. So when we open the sign up fragment, so we also see like equivalent sign up method, which has one more field because it has also the display name, but it works in similar way as login. So when we go to our view model, we would also have the sign up request and pass all those users and conversation token into conversation.
So the reason we have both the name and the display name is because the name needs to be unique in the context of an application, but also it's the stuff that you can't change, so you can change the display name if you like. So name is what we use internally to kind of identify the user, but when you show it in the app, you're going to use display name, I guess.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Seriously, like
we're building stuff live on screen.
Well, because like, so typically you would use ID, right, for this like kind of hidden identifier for the item.
I guess that's how the API, the conversation API works behind the scenes. And also display name is kind of what someone wants to be called, right? So you would want to display whatever they want to be called. And a lot of people change their names, on a daily basis or even more often. So we need to kind of use that, I guess, to kind of represent that person in whatever place we have them.
Exactly.
Cool. That was good.
So let's move to conversations.
Yeah, there's the conversations. So what's the conversation screen?
So this is the screen that displays our list of conversation. So this is it. So we are here. So we logged in the users, and we came to the list of the conversations where we can either see the details of conversation or click our plus button to create new one.
So I think if you're using the list of conversations from the API, that will return only the conversations that user is part of. So it won't return all the conversations in the system.
Well, you know the best, you did this part of the code.
No, that's what I'm saying, because that's what we did last week, and that's what we have. So in the same way, in the previous screen where you send the data across, you would have users, conversations, and GWT. So the users actually is a list of all the other users you have in the system. So it's a list of users, like you showed in the demo, a list of users you can select from to start a new conversation with.
Exactly.
Cool, that sounds good.
So so this fragment has like view bindings as usual, has a view model, but also has like navigation arguments, which is another delegate from the from Android Jetpack library, and another generated class that basically has list of all those arguments that we passed, and a lot of verification code. But basically, this is auto-generated, so we don't really care. We only care that this navigation arguments and the delegates allows us to retrieve the data. So when we see like when this is used, so on the creation, we'll go through this one by one. But at the end of the view creation, we basically pass all the navigation arguments to the view model, so the view model can make some decisions. But going from the start, we need the recycler view, which is default Android view for displaying list of things, which recyclers.
Yeah. Sorry, Igor, just one thing. Let me ask the chat if you have any questions about.
Okay, sure. Good point.
Because I think we finished quite a major part, which is authentication. So if anyone has any questions on any of the stuff that we just shown, we're more than happy to answer any questions. But it should be fairly straightforward. Those two screens are very similar to each other. And you end up with a list of conversation, a list of users you can have a conversation with, and all the details that you need in order to send subsequent requests.
Oh, one more thing that I haven't mentioned actually. So let's wait for questions if there are any.
You can go for it, and as the questions come, because I think there's a delay in the stream anyway when people are watching in the app.
Okay, so one more thing that we did from this login view model, we call this login method on our repository. But to keep things simple, what I'm doing is actually I'm holding a token within the repository itself. So this way, like we don't have to expose it outside, and the views can communicate. So for example, both login methods and the sign up that is here are storing the token within like a repository private variable or property, so we can access it later. So for example, on this get conversation screens, we will check like the state of the token to make sure it's not empty, and then we'll use this token to get requests for all the conversations. API service is a retrofit service class, and retrofit is most popular Android networking library.
Also, if you use this in a real app, you probably want to go a bit more than that, to not check it's just if it's installed, to check if it's expired, to check other stuff.
Yeah, things like this. So I think ideal scenario is like with tokens is that the server should give you 401 response, which is unauthenticated, and then like those libraries like retrofit allows you to build custom authenticator class that is called exactly when this return code is returned, and then redo requests with correct token.
Yeah, I mean, it's, drawing on my previous experiences as a mobile developer, I'm trying to find the fastest way to get people to the desired results. So if you look at the token and see if it's expired, you don't need to do that request. You just do another request to get another token. Or whatever, things like that, just to shortcut to avoid doing multiple requests.
So can JWT be invalidated like at all or not? No, yeah. So then this would work, because like on previous project I was using the tokens that can actually be invalidated by servers, so the logic differs, but with JWT.
Yeah, the only way to kind of invalidate JWT is not directly, but kind of because we have ACLs and stuff. So if you change something in the system and disallow a particular user to do certain actions, by the virtue of using the JWT, the server won't fulfill the desired actions. But directly, you can't expire JWT.
Okay. But I'm guessing in ideal world you would still want to do it somehow, right? Or at least give basic support to the app. So
that's why you have a server side, right? So in an ideal scenario, you should generate a GWT that is only valid for the next request or a very short period of times. So we usually advise people to do it, very, very short, like 30 seconds. Or another trick that you can have is you can have GWTs being requested as you request things and get a new GWT with every request. And that way you can get a fresh one all the time. And if you keep it like valid for 30 seconds, if you use it within 30 seconds, that means you get a fresh one all the time. So all sorts of different mechanisms to do this. Probably 30 seconds is a bit extreme. Probably banks will do something like that or something ridiculous. But 5 minutes, I think it's fine. If a user doesn't use the app within 5 minutes, you can expire it.
Yeah, because
sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, because when we think about this authentication, right, we always consider like this ideal scenario versus life is like you go with the phone and go to the tube. And you have like
no, absolutely, and that's how you mitigate it. But also in the mobile apps, you have mechanisms to store the username and password, so you don't have to ask it all the time from the user. So that way, you can get the GWT fairly easily. You don't have to ask the user to input anything.
Yeah, exactly. So as you mentioned, we want to keep things simple here, just to demonstrate how this can work. So, so this is our repository. Okay, and this is my maintenance. So going back to conversation screen, we have this recycler view that displays list of items. Like this is native Android component or view to deal with lists of items to make sure that we don't create too many views and they are like the list will be efficiently scrolling when it has let's say a few hundred elements. So we have some basic configuration where basically we told what kind of layout we want to use. Linear is like line by line under the line, and adapter is basically data source for this recycler view that we will modify in a second. Then of course we need to perform some actions, like when we click on this on the item on the list, we want to navigate to the details. When we click on our plus icon, we want to create new conversation. Like both two things are basically responsibility of the view model. Then we have this swipe refresh layout where basically you can swipe finger from the top, or maybe I can show you this even. Like so, when I take my finger on my physical phone, it's okay. I can do that yet. So let's forget about it for now. But when you swipe the finger, you can reload. I think it doesn't work when you don't have like items on the list or something. Oh, sorry. See, it starts working. So.
Michael has a message for us. Authentication. We no need to ever authenticate. Isn't it what help us?
So we have this refresh.
Yeah. Open everything. Open the data.
Yeah, exactly. Michael, I'm also like everything should be open forever.
Hack the planet.
Let's start with your bank account.
Yes, Michael. We're opening we're waiting a PR request to your bank details.
Exactly. So by the way, all those codes will be available in our open source repository, so you don't have to worry. It's there.
Oh, actually, I forgot to put the. We even prepared it. So we have like a Chrome around. There's a coupon code at the bottom. In here, and also there's a link, and that link goes to the app. So nextmod.dev/v-app. That should go straight to the repository that has the code.
Igor, do you want to check the conversation? I've logged in. I want to see if I've found.
Is there any? There is a second user. So
maybe. There you go.
Oh yeah.
All
so let's see some advanced stuff.
Emojis.
Okay.
Well, Abdul can send him emojis as well, but you need, I think you need a different event for that. You need an image event.
Exactly. I see new line is missing. We have some more bug to fix. Anyway, but we can chat with Abdul now, so we have working conversation.
Yeah.
So we'll see how to send and receive messages like in a minute or 5. So briefly looking at those conversations list, we still, we basically needs to handle adding the conversation. So this is like method where we show the Android native dialog, with lists of all the users that we retrieved before, and we allow to select a user. There's like a callback where each time we select a user, we can add it to selected user list. Each time when we deselect items or decheck it, we can remove it. And then after pressing OK button on the pop-up or dialog, we'll just create a conversation with ourselves and list of selected users. So this is the dialog, and the controller view model for this has the repository, and the client will get back to this in a minute. And basically stores list of the conversations on the users that we downloaded before. So the most important calls here are basically the create conversations, where we send me that. Okay, yes. So when we create the conversation, because the view model is responsible for managing the view, right? So when we, let's say, clicked on the UI, the create new conversations button, which should be somewhere here. Yes, exactly. Or then we want to call the method in the view model, and the reason why you want to do it is like for view model to be controller for this view. Like the view cannot make decisions on its own. Like we just basically saying to the view model, oh, this happened, so like user click this button, and then view model makes decision what to do. Like in this case, it just like show selection user dialog with certain lists of users. So this is one use case. Another one is create the conversation. So when we selected those users and we know where we wanna, what kind of conversation we wanna create, then we basically take this list and call another endpoint that is called create conversation, pass all those IDs, ID of the users, and then based on the response, we either, if it's successful, we will post this to update list on this view, and also navigate to our conversation detail of newly created conversation. If it's an error, we display some kind of message to the user. So I think this brings us to conversation details. So conversation details is is another like screen which has bindings, arguments, and view models. What differs it from other views is that it has a little bit more actions, like observes a little bit more types of actions from a view model. So because when you chat to the user, a few things can happen. So you can have error, like we have loading state, we may add new conversation line where new single message is created, or we'll basically set whole conversation, like set previous conversation at the beginning. When we enter, we already preloaded the conversation, so we can set all the data for these conversations. To keep things simple, conversations represented only as a text field with each message being represented as new line within this text field. If you want to go a little bit deeper and make it like properly, we should probably use recycler view again and have different views for different types of messages. So when users send, let's say, when I'm sending the message, probably message should be displayed on the right side using, let's say, blue tooltip or blue bubble. When I see received message, maybe it should be on the left with green bubble or something like that to distinguish messages sent by me, messages sent by from messages sent by other users. And on view created, we as usual, like initialize our view model with arguments, observe for some data, and set some bindings for the views. In this case, it's simple text field with simple send button, and that we've seen here. Right? So of course we don't want to send messages that are empty. So if messages are empty, we'll do nothing. But if user fills the message, right, and we send it, we remove the message from this text field and send it using the SDK. So actually, it's important to understand differences between the messages that we retrieve at the beginning. So when we open this conversation, we will use our own API. Let's say we open this conversation and we initialize it. So we would retrieve this conversation using our own custom API to download all the messages that are kind of present in this conversation before. We could also use Nextcom SDK for that, but just for this application, we decided to expose those conversation items as our custom endpoint. However, for the messages that are actually we sending or receiving, we need it's not an endpoint where you just tell get me list of conversation, get me results. Like it's real time, so we need to have a listener that will tell us, oh, new conversation has appeared. So for that, we will use Nextcom SDK. Oops. So we are using it here, but I mentioned it before that it was initialized in our main activity, basically with a builder where we create new instance of it. And from the moment we do that, we can then retrieve this instance using get static get method. Of course, like in ideal applications, again, should be injected into application so it facilitates testing. But here we just take static instance and assign it to local property. The reason why I'm doing that instead of just calling, like all those Nextcom client get or API repository within the code is that if you want to refactor this in the future to use dependency injection, this will be basically simple. And also, I'm not a fan of singletons spread across different places in the application because they are extremely hard to test, extremely hard to debug, and often it's really hard to say what's going on if with this multi-threaded environment with user-driven events and network-driven events. Like a lot of things can happen. So usually it's not that easy to.
Testing is just for people that makes mistakes. So you don't make mistakes. Right? Don't do any testing. Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you on the testing side of things. Yeah, unfortunately, if you can avoid using singletons, you should. But in some cases, you need access to one single resource. Like with an Nextcom client, you can create more than one, and that's why we have a singleton in there. It's entirely up to you how you manage it and how you kind of get it to the point where it's testable, right? So that's dependency injection that you just mentioned is a good way to mitigate that.
Yeah, exactly.
Could I just add one extra point on the stuff that we were discussing earlier about the events? So the reason we decided to do it this way is to make it a bit faster to load things. So the way events work, so everything is driven by events, right? So every time you send a message, every time you place a call, every time you start typing, there are events being sent in the context of a conversation. Client SDK, the moment you instantiate it, it starts getting all the events, and you get everything. Literally everything is coming at you in different types. Even so, every single event will get its own class, and objects will be at different types. But to get previous ones, you need to use a different method, and then you have to use pagination. Literally, just go through hundreds and hundreds, depending on how old the conversation is.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of doing that on the client, what we said is, we're going to do that on the server because the server is listening to what the Vonage server, right? So our companion server gets events via webhooks. So he stores that in the database. So for us, it's actually much simpler to compute that when you get the list of conversation. Sorry, when you request the details of conversation and send it back to you. It's just a trade-off. You can do it both ways. There is no, good or bad solution. Another advantage of doing it on the back end is you can have the same experience across different clients, right? So the iOS won't have to implement the same logic and ignore everything apart from text events and join and left events, for example. And as you add more things, you can enable more things in the back end, and then each client will have to implement it. Literally, that's the trade-off we made purely just to make it a bit simpler to program a client as well.
Yeah, so just to kind of fill the gap, so like because we have different kinds of events than text events, and like one of them may be besides user joins or send a message, we can send the images, and what kind of we can mute audio for events, right?
Yeah, there's typing, there's custom events where we can basically send anything, but there are lots of different events for everything. And also it's worth mentioning that two different types of events where you can get on a webhook, right? So you can get voice events and you can get RTC events. You should probably use RTC events because you get more details in RTC events. But that you get RTC events when you have voice-related events as well. So just because you have a call, for example, to a phone number, doesn't mean you get only certain events on certain webhooks. So you get all the events everywhere. But the RTC is kind of where we want to take it. You have more data. I think you have even some quality-related data in there. Certainly you have pricing, and I think that's in all of them. But you should use the RTC events.
Yeah, so this relates to our our server companion app that this mobile client is using. Yeah, another good use case for those events downloaded from our server companion app may be that, let's say you have long conversation with few thousand messages, so you would give user like only 20 or 50 events at the beginning, because usually they would never need more, right? But when they start scrolling, you can like deliver them more. So this way, you would only have like certain subset of events to make sure your application is fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way we send those like real-time events, we use the Nexmo client instance. So on this instance, we would call the get conversation method, where we will download the conversations that we just created or just entered using the ID, and then on the callback again we have an error. We would notify the user about the error, but when we download the conversation correctly, we would add the message listener to the conversation. So this way we could actually listen for incoming messages. So the message listener, when I scroll it a little bit higher here, so we have the message listener here, and we have multiple types of events that we can listen for. The one that we are interested in is text event, which is basically saying us, hey, there is a new message within this conversation, and we can this message is of type next text event that we can process. So we take this event and we can extract the line, which is basically custom string that we create. So our line will be like username, so like Igor said, and the content of the event. Of course, it can be anything that you want. We like represent this line as a line of text within the text field, but it may be other format as well if you wanna go a little bit fancier with the UI. So this is how you would receive event. But when the user clicks conversation define, when the user sends an event, let me find the send. Oh yeah, so we have this send message button, right? And each time user sends a message, we will call the send message on our view model, and we would use the actually conversation instance that we downloaded from Nexmo client to call send text, and this way we would send a message like message event into the conversation, so all the clients would receive it exactly as you see in the sending video message. So I think this is the conversation sign. Like, we could talk a little bit more about repository, but all it does, it just uses this retrofit library for network communication, sets the custom, just sets retrofit instance, create retrofit service to communicate with servers, and then expose those methods like load conversation or login, just to give us this capacity for the app.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it, to be honest. It was great actually that you explained it from the top down, so that way you can see the different components, and then you kind of dug deeper and kind of see how they connect to each other. So yeah, that looks good. Any question, Abdul, for Igor? Anything we should? Any difficult questions to ask him?
No, well, I spotted I made a
now you have a question.
You'll get his
I
turn
made a
next week.
similar what's it, error in my thing, because on line 118 you've got from member.user.name,
Mm-hmm.
then that should be display name, because like if you open up if your emulator, if you want to open it,
which class was it?
Just over there in 118, exactly where you are. That should be display name rather than name.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the kind of mistake that is happening.
So because yeah, if you open up the emulator, you can see that it's like alternating between using, because I think the backend returns display name and you were using username, so it was showing the difference.
I think that's why I think like ID as a identifier for the user might be a little bit better not to make.
Well, I think it's sort of how like Twitter works, right? So you have like your handle, which is somewhat fixed, but then you can change your name whenever you want, right? So I think
exactly. So we will have this code merged in our repository, right? So it will be I will probably drop you the link somewhere on the chat.
It's already in the chat. nextmodev/vapp.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be in the client Android in there. I think it's in a branch at the moment, right? So we're gonna clean it and merge it.
Yeah. So currently we have this in built-up branch, but we'll merge it probably after the stream. So,
I need to go in there and kind of clean some of those old branches, because I think we're kind of done with them. And some of the Rails stuff, for example, I'm gonna take off entirely, because we decided not to do the server in Rails, never backend in Rails, because it's just easier for people to use JavaScript and Node. So I think Dwayne posted in there, and also it's at the bottom of our screens on bottom left. Cool, that sounds good. I think that looks really good. I'm happy with that. I think it's we're getting there. It took a bit longer to do the back end because it does a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's always looks simple at the surface, right? Like when you go deeper, you go like even within this app, right? We do demo, but like usually we handle error cases like really briefly.
Yeah.
We don't really go into super details. So.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we started with, and this is purely my kind of misunderstanding and kind of, sorry, not necessarily misunderstanding, but kind of underappreciation of how much work it is. We were trying to use the conversation APIs directly as you were requesting things from a companion API, which is fine, apart from the fact that you start having the N+1, scaling problems, because you get the list of conversation, and then you have to get a list of members in the conversation, and then you get the list of events in the conversation, and then you have paginations for everything. So with that, the way we did it is we created a database that stores everything. And we have two scripts, one to synchronize the users, because the users don't come through the webhooks, because they're not related to the context of a conversation APIs necessarily. So for that, we do different things. One is synchronize it, but also if you get a webhook with a conversation that has an unknown user for a member, we actually go and get the user as the webhook comes in. And then we have a synchronization for events, which goes in and synchronizes conversations. Sorry, not for events, but conversations. That does conversations, members, events, and everything. So that way we have that running every hour, but also we have a webhooks. So as you do stuff, you get things in the database ingested by webhooks. So on new API requests, you get everything. You don't have to wait for the synchronization server to run.
So if you would be building this like second time, would you use like Vonage Server SDK instead of the conversation API?
The conversation API is still in beta at the moment, so it's not available under the Server SDK. But once it will be GA, definitely the Server SDK, because things will be so much easier, and I don't have to import libraries to the API requests and HTTP requests. I think I'm using Axios, and it'll be much faster. Even synchronization will be much faster. Plus, you have a pagination much easier done. So
because usually as a dev, right, you want to express simple concept like get me list of conversations, but then you go into those details that you mentioned, and it's like, oh, I need to synchronize that and wait for that. And
I think the Server SDKs traditionally for other APIs make things way simpler. especially in the context of a language. So you get to use the idioms of that particular language. So you use objects and whatever. And you have a sync await in JavaScript that will be baked in with the conversation API, so you can do everything that you need to. But for now, we'll have to use the APIs directly while they're still in beta. Cool. That sounds really good. Any last thoughts? Anything else we need to tell people? Actually, I have a couple of things I want to share. Give me just 1 second. Let me share my screen.
I also have one.
I think we think about the same thing. If I might not be
mistaken. Go. I'm pretty sure not, but go first.
Okay. Your blog post on Android with Flutter. Was that it?
Not the same thing.
Not the same thing. Good. That means we're gonna have more things to discuss. Yeah. Cool. Give me just 1 second. Let me share my screen. Yeah, this is my screen. So one thing. Oh, here you go. We're live on Twitch as well. So one thing I want to let people know is, especially if you work in Android, Igor published last week using Android with Flutter. It's a great tutorial/blog post on how to use the client SDK with Flutter. There is one coming with iOS next week, I believe, probably, most likely. But yeah, that's kind of the big thing. Other stuff that we have here are the blog posts that have been published recently. The new version of Ruby SDK 7.4.0. I think this one deals with NCCO, so you can create NCCOs easily in code. So you can just build it literally like that, using kind of, I have to make it a bit bigger so people can see it. So it's, this is where I'm saying, use for a particular language, a particular library, you make it really, really easy to use like that, using the idioms of the language. And the last one we have here is how to create a loudness detector for video API. This is written by one of our engineers. This has to do with the video APIs. So you can auto-mute your microphone if there is too much noise and too much, if you laugh too hard, basically, you just get cut off. So it wouldn't work for me. Cool. Sorry, Igor, you wanted to say something else.
Yeah. So those delegates actually, they really help a lot of with development, especially if you combine those navargs, view bindings, and the third one for bindings. Like this together with this fragment constructor, repass and layout, give you really nice way of kind of abstracting a lot of complexity from Android. And I really think it's worth looking into that. I tweeted about it recently, and I got almost 200 likes and 20-something retweets. So people kind of appreciate that, and they see that it's good direction to go with Android nowadays. So I strongly encourage you to take a closer look at those delegates.
Nice. Do you have a link? Maybe we can post it in the chat.
So I think probably at some point we'll write an article about that. But for now, I would say the repository code is the best place to take a look at that.
That sounds good. Cool. Other things that happened this week, I think there are 2 more shows this week. There's Low Code Hour with Yulia, and they're doing. I don't think she has a topic at the moment. And then our lovely colleague Michael Jolly, the bald bearded builder, is doing Mistakes Were Made. And he's going to do some NPM packages with TypeScript, and I think he's still in the chat somewhere. Apart from that, a couple more things that I want to let you know about the Voyages program. So if you want to be part of a selected group of people that have early access to various APIs, to various tools that we have, you get to talk to us directly, you get involved in a lot of initiatives we have internally. You can submit your name and apply to be a Voyager. It's a fairly straightforward process. So yeah, that's really, really good. The other thing that we have lots of events that we're doing. Personally, I'm doing CityJS this week with Dwayne, who's in the chat. So I know we have some. We have Kelly, our colleague, giving a workshop on how to build CLIs. I think it's here somewhere. Oh, there he is. Demystifying, not domesticated, demystifying. I'll get it right eventually. CLI development. So he's speaking, I believe, on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken.
This is good catchphrase. I'm using this for my next talk.
Which one?
Demystifying.
Demystifying. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to pronounce as well, especially if you're not
Sounds smart.
native English speaker. Yeah. Well, yeah. Cool. So that's us for this week. Thank you, Exi, for the the /Voyagers in the chat. And what would we do without you? Actually, you're not a Voyager, are you, Exi? So do you want to follow your own advice? Joking. I'm joking. Yeah, so Dwayne is looking forward to the City.js as well. I think it's going to be really interesting. They use a really interesting platform to do the whole things. Oh, thank you, Exi, for the spotlight as well. So if you do a better job than us, so yeah, wink, wink. Let's do it like that. Yeah, so if you want to write for our blog posts, you can write a blog post for us. Sorry, and you're paid $500 per post, or we can send that to a charity if you're choosing, or you can get paid directly. It's entirely up to you. Lots of initiatives that we have for the community. Lots of things that we want to show you. We have lots of APIs kind of coming on, and hopefully. Well, you learn something today with Android. We're going to resume next week. Next week is going to be exactly the same format, but this time Abdul is going to drive it, and he's going to show us how you build exactly the same thing, but with iOS. So I always wanted to do this. So let's see big things.
I will be watching. I will prepare questions.
Yeah. So it's Igor's turn to actually ask hard questions. So, but I'll be in your camp, Abdul, because I'm still an iOS at heart. So yeah, it's 2 against 1, so you can't win. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, chat, for being with us. Thank you, Exi, Dwayne, Michael. Probably some others that I managed to miss. Thank you for being with us. Hope you had a good start of the week, and yeah, keep up the mobile development and native development, and yeah, we'll see you next week in the same format. Have a good week. See you.
Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.